Thank you very much, dear colleagues, for attending this lecture, which has a topic which already struck me from the beginning since I was working in Jordan, and a discussion came up about megasites together with Gary Rollerson. After more than 15, 16 years, the topic deserves some update, and I'm going to present this update to you today. So now I have a problem. Yeah. The term mega, I have to say that it's the nature of such a lecture that one has to work with working thesis. So many of the statements are in a thesis manner. Secondly, I have, since this is going to be published online in a YouTube channel, avoided to give keywords, but to present clear sentences in order to avoid misunderstandings. The early understanding of the megasite phenomenon until 2010 has to be revised in many ways, but not in its basic understanding. The term megasite was promoted by Gary and me since the late 80s, early 90s, and was permanently offered in the debate by both of us in lectures until 2004, when I made a publication in more details about the term and its meaning in Central to What. That time, the major characteristics claimed for the megasite phenomenon was that Jericho and possibly similar sites were understood as stimuli for territorial pressure pouring into the Transjordanian Highlands. Not really, at least I was not claiming that it was a greater major relocation of people, but simply developmental concepts and territorial pressure that made megasites appearing quite quickly within generations in the Eastern Highlands. It was stated also that megasite populations may have reached 2,000 and created progressive population dynamics, resulting in aggregation and agglomeration on all levels, not only architecturally, but also in the crafts system and the social organization, even the intangible cognitive territories were witnessing these aggregation and agglomeration. At the same time, already by that time, and without having the great results of Wael Abu Azize and his team in the East, I stated that the attractiveness and richness of Eastern steppes was one of the reasons why these megasites could grow, resulting then in the early pastoralism and hunting of wild ungulates. But still that time, the idea was that hunting wild ungulates was done by shepherds who incursed the eastern steppes from the megasites. that we have own subsistence economies, like now proven, of herders and hunters out there, was not known by that, by that time. Another thing that was clear, that the megasites reached 15 to 20 hectares, that they always are near rich springs, and that they hardly had subordinate settlements. They were central, but they had not a centrality function. Also, it was clear that extended households must have ruled the social organization of these megasites, different from the PPNB settlements we had before in the area of the Jordanian Highlands, showing sizes of maximum 3 to 4 hectares. Also, it was claimed until 2010 that a hypertrophic aggregation, agglomeration processes and the limited habitats in which the megasites were flourishing led to an early collapse, in some cases, maybe even after a few generations, or less than 10 generations, and led to splitting social structures, meaning this emergence of a steppe pastoral societies and large corporate farming societies in the West, especially. This was a statement made already before encountering Mozart or understanding Mozart. I should say that megasite phenomena are nothing new in the Near Eastern Neolithic. We have megasites, maybe not as large scale occupations in regions. The earliest I know or understand is the Morable Toreba Abu Huraira complex. The megasite corridor of the LPPNB has received some new working theses in the last years, especially through the household and debt project for Baja, meaning saying that the late pre-pottery Neolithic B megasite phenomenon in the Jordanian Highlands cannot be seen anymore as an isolated, prosperous, and regional episode, that it was a part of a complex, supra-regionally linked and shifting socio-economic land use and migration processes in the southern Levant, which today, I think, after checking the records of the Contenson's work and later works in the Ghouta, that possibly where we deal also with megasites in the 8th millennium. The dynamics of a megasite development in eastern Transjordanian Highlands must have started by interacting overexploitation and overpopulation of the environmentally limited Mediterranean regions west of the Rift Valley, and certainly must have been fostered by the attractive potentials of a less populated PPNB Transjordanian Highlands and the vast eastern grasslands that of the Western Arabian Plateau. I remember a publication of author already claiming that in the 8th millennium, these territories were still occupied by the latest hunter-gatherers in the MPPNB times. And today we know from the industries found during surveys there that since the early PPNB, we have evidence of these hunter-gatherers and their ephemeral campsites. This is covering all northern Arabia. The expensive development of the megasites characterized also by an north-south expansion of the socio-economy, which you can see by the small, you see here, I inserted in the graph here. I think the bridgehead was the area of Jericho, of population and concept pressure. And when it migrated southwards, meaning that Eingasal witnessed the Megasite phenomenon earlier than the southern Levant, and it retreated from there also earlier again than in the north. From the megasites, increasingly during the second half of the 8th millennium, polylinear incursions by LPPN shepherds took place into the eastern steppe using the grasslands there. And of course, here they were competing with the territories of the late hunter-gatherer groups and the migrating angulates who also nourished on the grasslands. Near the junction of the late and final PPNB, around 7,000, new subsistence mode had established in many parts of the eastern steppes. This is L to FPPNB mobile pastoralism, which I think is a candidate for niche agriculture. If we see the results of Sumia Fuji also, and indigenous pastoral-venatorial subsistence, which I think is, and I'm sure that, or I know that while Abu Aziz and Muhammad Tarawna also think in this direction, is a subsistence form of its own right, which was slowly absorbing or merging with the late hunter-gatherers in the area. These new and attractively highly productive liveways appear responsible for the collapse and transformation of the Transjordanian megasites at the end of late and final PPNB. However, I still believe that the megasites collapse or transformation must have been mainly prepared by the missing socio-economic answers and not found in time for the growth problems they have. And in addition, I think this was cooperating with the climate deterioration we have at that time. The collapse, or partly the transformation of the megasites, led to a partial reoccupation of former territories in the moderate Mediterranean zones. Here I'm speaking about the Mozart phenomenon, and I expect that more sites will be identified west of the Rift Valley, testifying the partial reoccupation. It has to be questioned, in my opinion, if major translocations of populations were responsible for these developmental shifts, or to what extent these shifts sustained on themselves were outsourcing transformations in a way by the increase of populations and territorial stress they created, resulting, of course, also in limited translocations, meaning people pressed out of the systems. In that sense, it appears to me that the great eastward migration to the late Neolithic Black Desert, as described by Gary in 2021, appears to have been just one of several incursions happening between 2 millennia from 7,500. I said that the new research, including the research on Baja and Basta in the recent years, changed the understanding what a megasite is, not in its basic traits, but in more details. They were confirmed the basic traits of the megasites throughout the years, but it turned out that our heuristic frameworks and non-holistic approaches on the megasites became insufficient and demanding basic revisions of deep knowledge foci. The new research from outside the megasite corridor I already mentioned. This is research on the kite economies and research on the Neolithic intrusions and adaptations into Northern Arabia, the Arabian Peninsula. And not to forget also the understanding of epipaleolithic agglomeration and their tendencies for productive features which come close to Neolithic economies. So this has to be kept in mind when reconsidering the megasites. And for this, at least our project has introduced the concepts of commodification, territoriality, habitus, and the thanatological approaches most recently and yet unpublished. This gives me a chance to hint on a new book published by Avi Gopher and Anna Ackerfeld, a sampler on recent research of PPNB, death lore, and burial practices. And also for the new concepts, the introduction of ethological and anthological perspectives is most necessary, helping to exploit much more our deep knowledge on the megasites. I don't read the headlines to save time. Whereas the megasites, I'm now turning into more details about the megasites and what the results on them from a Baja and Basta perspective are. Our ethological and ontological research shows dispositions and testifying a process from general to confined, tangible and intangible territories including the cognitive territories. This means an ongoing separation during the LPPNB of territories and the establishment of confined corporate properties. Built territories become also more confined and socio-economic refuge within the habitus communities, both on the village and the group levels. We have secondary evidence only for defensive dispositions and aggression management, especially in the evidence for the social working in these groups. We have a highly productive use of built territory in the shape of diversification and intensification in household production. There is intensifying intentional ritual termination of territories, including burning of households. We have new types of magic and ritual marking of built territories also. And now some examples for that. We have ritually deposited, terminated household inventories and events and other practices of burying the terminated, e.g. the burying power article stands for this by Marion Benz. We have intramural subfloor burial grounds in the sites with status, wealth, and empathy signals, duet deposits, magic marking, and so on. I may say at this point that most of the statements I present here on burying our work results by a group headed by Marion Benz and Julia Kresky, who are responsible in the project for all things related to death. When we have testified innovative surplus technological productions in all or in most crafts, e.g. to mention the bidirectional surplus plate production and plate trade from Basta and the specialized ground stone industry. But we have also the first evidence of clay vessel production and experimental menting with mortar-like material for vessel production were carried out by one of our Lucia is doing this. And if someone can help with a very strange feature, we have heated copper minerals in Paja, still not investigated yet. Also, symbolic commodities play an increasing role in the megasites, and there is evidence of high pressure in abiotic and biotic resources from the empiric data we have. I rush through here. I rush through here the evidence we have from the from the burials. We have not only single burials, as in the case many other megasites have. Baja has, to my knowledge, for the LPPNB megasites, the only collective burials, sometimes really burial chambers or burials using one of the tiny rooms only, filled with or furnished with several inhumations, sometimes up to 15, most of them children, but also adults, all appearing like they are a snapshot of a current household burying its death in the basement underneath. From these burials, for instance, the famous Baja Dagger's Camp, or masses of beads, sometimes arrowheads, mother of pearl ornaments, and so on. These burials, like also the single burials, show quite a heavy use of red pigment, but not only spread as a liquid across the corpses, coloring them, staining them, including staining the artifacts given to the dead. The left shows unusual upper armoring attached to the body of the individual, published by Marion Benz in the article Burying Power, or the now famous necklace of Jamila, which you see a reconstruction of in the lower left. It is now on exhibition in the new Petra Museum. Here we have more of the work of Marion Benz. In my view, all expressing an otherworldly reciprocity, and we supported by acts of habitus statements in the burial practices. We have evidence which can be discussed as individuation, legitimation, and termination, and disabling the dead and respectively their positions. In the upper left, we have the grave goods of the young man, which was described as an outstanding person, but not yet as somebody who is a leader in the sense of a cone-shaped chiefdom, but rather a person still at the level of an egalitarian community. To the lower left, we have here and here two child burials, one of which with a very rich cowrie inventory, possibly representing a belt and a cap like glove. Quite common are acts of hiding and caching in the sites, often showing respect to previous installation, like the mural we have here from Basta, or what Bodal Hermansen has published, the hoard from Basta, which seems to be a return to the ancestors for extracted wall stones. It's a pit it's in a pit with hoard, right where they have stolen from the ancestors building material. But this is only 2 examples of quite more features we have. Iania recently published an article about the bangles of Mozart, where truly some of these bangles were found in association with arms in the burials. We don't have such evidence of the sandstone or limestone stone rings in the LPPNB. They never occur in graves, and even where dimensions do not fit to adult or sub-adult arms, which has led to the understanding that maybe in the LPPNB we have, in the Jordanian Highlands at least, they have served other purposes. I'm now turning to a basic issue in understanding the megasites, and this is the identity or identity formation we have attested in the megasite. The mentioned Household and Death project of the German Research Foundation at the Pre-University of Berlin, which was co-directed by Christoph Purschwitz, Marion Benz, and me, has dug into new understanding, which has also produced the Neolithic corporate identity aggregate on the right side. We are thinking that that these identity formation has led in the LPPNB of the megasites to something for which I took the term habitus societies, but not in Bourdieu's sense. The Neolithic identity of the megasites was covering all the spheres of life in these societies, which was confined and was characterized by confined and segregated permanent, meaning resident, physical, and tangible and intangible spaces, territories, meaning everything, not only the physical space, but also cognitive territories. It seems that the social domains of the self, meaning not an individual but a individual, has covered all the family organization, clan and community organization, including the cultural domains, which were using commodification regimes in producing or generating material and immaterial artifacts for supporting these identities, including new symbolic systems. The spiritual and moral value domains was influenced by these confined habitus. I just see here that I use the term idiocracy here, omit this. This refers to the northern habitus system, especially those in the territories of northern Syria and Anatolia. Sorry for this. In the south, we deal always, we only deal with habitus societies which were right, informal, and not needing idiocratic support by imagery. I present now some theses on the relational habitus communities. The definition of habitus you find at the bottom of the page, not to be repeated here by me. In my understanding, the Megasite phenomenon altered the identity formation in the southern Levant considerably by the establishment of extended families, take this in quotation marks, families, because this way of socio-economy fostered or required confined relational individuals and group selves more than this was the case in the previous periods of PPN. Neolithic identity formation operates at a cultural and cognitive intersection from general to confined identities and reciprocities, and it aims to identify, define, and discriminate from the other, and this to an extent not developed by hunter-gatherers. Confined identities are considered to result from intensifying productive regimes, while the more flexible identity formation of foraging milieux and its Neolithic relicts are expected to have followed a generalized understanding of identities and identity formation. Again, this is mirroring or following the confined, respectively, generalized reciprocities in the same milieu. Transjordan's LPPNB confined relational individuals and group selves of the megasites established also the habitus aggregates or regimes which made mobile pastoral and pastoral-venatorial communities of the eastern steppes flourishing and establishing. I think this was the birth zone of a social paradigm which rules even the region's traditional life modes of today, meaning especially the habitus societies of the Paleo-Bedouins and the Bedouins. Yes. I'm now turning to the end and giving a summary of what I see, how I see the Megasite phenomenon being embedded into the larger development in the southern Levant. The megasites cannot be seen isolated anymore as a prosperous and regional episode. They are part of a complex and supra-regionally linked and shifting socio-economic affair characterized by new land uses and complex migration processes which appear and I guess continued even beyond the 2 millennia of the 8th and 7th millennium considered here. I already mentioned, and this is a violet arrow in the top, that possibly north of Lake Tiberias there was a movement into the Ghouta from the Mediterranean zone around the mid of the 8th millennium, causing there the increase of settlement sites like Kureva and Tel Ramat. The dynamics of the red arrows crossing the Rift Valley from the south must have started by an overexploitation and overpopulation of the limited Mediterranean regions there. Mediterranean, I mean sensu the plant geography. These catchments really are limited there, and they generated, of course, overexploitation and overpopulation because they are so productive. And in that way, they were pressing out people from there, or at least put pressure on the settlements on the eastern sides, which were less large, which I said they had 3 to 4 hectares probably, especially in the south. And of course, these people getting pressed from the west into the eastern hills, they were also knowing about the vast potential of the grasslands in the east. I mean, the area later occupied by the L to F PPNB steppe pastoral socio-economy. So at least at the beginning, also there is a deer decline in the megasites for hunted species. At least the hunted species of the eastern steppes may have been increasing the attractiveness to settle down in the Jordanian Highlands during the LPPNB. We have to imagine that at least refugia of hunter-gatherers existed, and even in the early establishment of the LPPNB, still there we have to expect contacts between the inhabitants of the megasites and hunter-gatherers still in their life mode in the eastern steppes. The developing progressive population dynamics of the megasites forced, of course, to secure the productive liveways they were sustained on by all sorts of social and economic diversification, as I exampled before, explained before by examples from Basta and Ba. And this diversification certainly led in the subsistence sector to an outsourcing and exploitation of or gradually outsourcing and gradually exploitation of eastern grasslands from the moment near side catchments were overexploited by herds getting larger and larger. So this beginning of an rather independent pastoralism, which I expect for the LPPNB in the area, independent subsistence mode, independent groups from the megasites, was, and this is by the indicated by these arrows, they certainly came in contact with hunter-gatherers with whom they were competing for the grassland territories, the herders and those who were following the more or less migrating ungulates. So I guess it took a few generations that the pastoral people from the megasites, possibly now already having an independent subsistence, were merging with the hunter-gatherers, creating socio-economy and subsistence of their own right, of its own right, and getting probably in exchange with the late and final megasites still existing. The megasites, as I said before, seem to have collapsed. Some have transformed but at least in the south they collapsed. In the North Jordan, they more transformed into the PPNC times. And the major reason for their decrease in size and importance and productive levels, I see that the megasites couldn't cope with the growth they have produced, leading to social problems in the settlements. In addition, of course, there was a stress by the 9.2 key event, which certainly has fostered also the move of people to the desert using or producing the proteins out there. The collapse of the partly transformation of the megasites led also, as the Mozart phenomenon may indicate, to a partial reoccupation of former territories in the moderate Mediterranean zones. I mean, especially the PPNC sites and early pottery Neolithic sites there, and of course in North Jordan. Still, we have to be cautious, I think, with understanding this as a major relocation, although the size of Mozart really is very astonishing. Maybe not all the regions in the favored zones west of the Rift Valley had such developments, but the near future, I hope at least, will show that megasite phenomena are reversible. At the end of the lecture, I want to raise the question if exclusively major translocations of populations were responsible for the developmental shifts, or if these shifts mainly sustained on themselves by the increase of their populations and the territorial stress they created. The rapid transformations within only a few generations, including the establishment of the habitus social organization that finally absorbed the latest hunter-gatherers refugia in northern Arabia, were securing and promoting further the productive lifeways during the 8th and 7th millennium BCE in the southern Levant, and the role of major relocations. I mean, understanding relocation as an event where thousands of people decide to move from one region to a farer region may has to be questioned. Rather, the development or less revolutionary development is behind all this, that outsorting and splitting communities are behind these features. Thank you so much for your attention, and I hope that you have many questions.
Okay. دارت هذه المحاضرة حول ظاهرة إنشاء وازدهار مواقع ضخمة ميجا سايتس في الفترة المتأخرة من العصر النيوليثي ما قبل الفخار با في المرتفعات الهضبية للأردن. وأوضح جبل أنه لا يمكن اعتبار هذه المواقع الضخمة ظاهرة محلية معزولة، وإنما هي إقليمية ظهرت كجزء من تحولات اجتماعية واقتصادية وهجرة سكانية محلية وإقليمية في جنوب بلاد الشام خلال الألفين الثامن والسابع قبل الميلاد، بما في ذلك منطقة الغوط القريبة من دمشق. يعتقد جيبل أن هذه التحولات قد بدأت في أعقاب استغلال مفرط واكتظاظ سكاني للمواقع الواقعة في مناخ البحر المتوسط والمحدودة جغرافياً بين البحر المتوسط ووادي الأردن، وبالمقابل الإمكانيات الكامنة في الأراضي الشاسعة في المناطق الواقعة شرقي الشق السوري الأفريقي الذي ما زال يقطنها الصيادون، وازدياد طلب رعاة العصر النيوليثي ما قبل الفخار المتأخر على أراضي السهوب. لقد أوضح جيبل أن الضغوطات السكانية في المواقع الضخمة مثل البسطة والبجعة لتأمين مصادر عيش بديلة مع ازدياد سكاني، وبالمقابل مصادر اقتصادية محدودة، مما أجبرهم لإيجاد وسيلتين جديدتين للعيش: تربية المواشي في الحقبة المتأخرة من العصر النيوليثي ما قبل الفخار با، ومصدر آخر يجمع بين الرعي والصيد في الهضاب الشرقية والبادية في نهايته أو بداية العصر النيوليثي الفخاري. ويدعي أن هذه الطرق المعيشية كانت هي أيضا المسؤولة عن الانهيار النهائي لهذه المواقع الضخمة في نهاية العصر، وإمكانية هجرة جديدة غربا إلى المواقع التي هجرها السكان. وأخيرا أثار جيبل سؤالا جوهريا عما إذا كانت تحولات استمرارية أو أنها كانت تحولات سريعة وحتمية هدفها تأمين وتعزيز مصادر غذاء لمجتمع زاد عدده خلال الألف الثامن والسابع قبل الميلاد في جنوب بلاد الشام. شكرا.
Thank you. Thank you. شكرا.